Welcome back to Divine Ethereal Beings, episode 22. Today we're going to be talking about awakening, spiritual awakening. What the heck is it? What does it just what is it in all the ways, right? What can the experience be? What is actually going on? Um so do you want to start out?
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing that actually is really coming to me is like the teams start flying through the door and we start doing this. It's so funny. Um, but the change in energy and how this is actually looking for a lot of people now. Like it is not the same experience anymore. And even if, you've been through an awakening, or let's say you're more aware or you're more in tune, I am finding a lot of other people are starting to notice differences even within self of their own connections, of how things are working for themselves or how things are appearing anymore. They just keep coming back to this massive shift that's happened on Earth, and not just on Earth, but in our universe in total. So, other planets are being affected, our moon's being affected, their sun's being affected. And so it's just really a different environment altogether. Like there's just such a different shift of energy that all this is are starting to look different as well. So I mean, the typical awakening, back in the day, we would say it doesn't feel the same anymore. You're still going to get some intensities, of course, but I feel like a lot of people are just naturally becoming more aware of just energy in general, whether they're aware of it in themselves or seeing in other people, right? Calling people out on their shit. Yeah, you're not okay. Tell me what's okay today. Like, why are you trying to put a mask on type of feeling, right? People are just kind of calling each other out a little bit more, being able to see emotion. And it wasn't so obvious, I don't think, before. I think it was easier to hide because the masking of the energy was different. It was more of a duality than necessarily it is coming into these days. So I think that's also a part of why I think this one felt important to talk about, is because it is changing. So, I mean, we can talk a little bit about our own awakenings because they were definitely in different timelines, different times in the world. And it was different, obviously, for everybody, and it will be depending on what your journey looks like. But I think it's also important to talk about how it is shifting for so many people now, and not to get upset or worried by it. It's actually good shifts. It's okay that things are changing, but it is a space that we definitely have to accept and be confident in self, and knowing that change is okay and it doesn't have to look one way or another. So I think awakening is often described by so many as a certain way of being, or something very specific happening to someone else. And that's also not very true because it's different for everybody. So if you want to maybe give some pieces for yours, because yours was quite extreme, I would say, than your typical person's, for the intensity wise, I would say more so. Whereas, mine kind of came and went, a little bit here and there rather than getting the entire plate delivered to me at once. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, as I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm like, I'm going to look up the actual definition of awakening. Um, because it can be such a, everybody can hold such a different definition for what it is based on their experience or people that they know's experience, right? And it can be like what you were talking about, this kind of very subtle things of recognizing people wearing masks or their emotions, right? Or it can be like the veil is lifted and all of a sudden you're living in the spirit world without any context or reference, like what the heck, and feel like you're going crazy. And I think it's also important to state that you may have an experience like I had, or like one thing that really you reference as your awakening, but it's important to understand that you'll always be going through further, deeper, more expansive awakenings, even in your journey. You're always expanding consciousness more and more and more. So I find that even people who have been through an awakening and are on their journey, like they're continuing to traverse additional layers of awareness or awakening, right? So the definition is, of course, an active waking from sleep. So, again, this metaphorical sleep, this unconsciousness, this not really knowing or understanding what's going on in the world, kind of not questioning things, just being status quo, right? Doing what you're told and conforming and all of the things that are of the world that most of us come out of or are still living in, right? There are a lot of people still there. So, or it is an act or moment of becoming suddenly aware of something, coming into existence or awareness. So, those are some of the definitions, and I think it's helpful to even look that up because even that is giving you additional perspectives or reference points for it to kind of widen your definition. So before I talk about mine, do you have anything to say about that definition?
Yeah, and again, it's like definitions of our words can really shape our reality sometimes, and that is also becoming more and more prevalent these days, I find, especially, if we've got the collectives coming through, a lot of the times they will say, "What does that word make you actually feel?" Because when we remember our words are just as powerful as the frequency of creation, it really starts to make us become more aware of even typical words. So I think it's a really great idea to like look up definitions and see how it actually makes you feel. I think that's really on point. I really do feel like it is awakening is pretty defined quite well for most people and how they would actually maybe view that. But like I can hear Zahara saying, but you're not really awakening to anything. You're just remembering who you truly are. And I think that's a really important reference too. And I mean, yes, we will always be growing and expanding here because that's what we're fucking here for. This is the adventure. This is not our end all be all. This is just a place where we get to learn and expand and grow in whatever way our soul is looking to do that, or for your conscious self as well, because of the line of free will. Your soul might have somewhat of a path laid out long before you've gotten here, but you also get to choose while you are here what you wish to actually experience. So if all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I want to experience this or that, I have this kind of impact, you have the power to do that as well. It's just the awakening part is just remembering how you can actually create that from a conscious basis and bringing that fully more integration of a higher self into a human experience rather than, just feeling like we're completely isolated and being taught to be living in the box that everybody told us we had to be in. So we're definitely in times where this is becoming really relevant for a lot of people. A lot more questioning is definitely happening. So I think this is a great time to be talking about this stuff as well, because I get constantly asked. And honestly, I've never actually talked a lot about my journey. I've had some people, I've known you for a while, but you never really showed like shown us or told us much about your actual journey. So I think this is a great time. Let's just put it on a fucking podcast and get it out there.
Fair, fair. Yeah. So my awakening, I was definitely living in that box, that life that I thought I was supposed to have. I was not happy and didn't know or understand why. And so for me, I got a high fever for 3 days. My body started vibrating. The world around started vibrating. And so all I could see was molecules vibrating. There was next to no veil. I could see other beings, the trees, the plants, the rocks, all of nature was doing some really interesting things and talking to me. And I had no kind of reference point or context. I literally felt like I could put my hand through the walls because to me, everything wasn't a solid object. It was just molecules vibrating. And so coming back to the piece of remembering, for years, I spent searching, seeking, trying to understand and get an explanation that felt true to me on what had occurred. And so thus began my journey and all my training and certifications and all the things I've done. And so it's only in the like last year even that it's really come in of what even that was for me. And for me, that awakening experience that lasted 5 months of the world vibrating and me vibrating, and me truly seeing how energy works and how the universe works and all of that, even though I didn't have the language to understand what I was seeing, it was a remembering. I came to find out that, a lot of people talk about a Kundalini awakening, right? And doing Kundalini breathing and different things like that to activate that awakening within self. Well, I wasn't doing anything. This just kind of like smacked into me. And what it was all of my kind of like my true nature, my soul essence, all of my gifts and abilities from all of my existences came online at one time for 5 months. And I really got to see what is possible. Um, and so it was a remembering in my case. So that's kind of like a really short tidbit of my experience, without, staying focused on just what that experience was for me. So I like that you brought up that it's more a remembering of who we are and what we're capable of and how the world actually works, how energy actually works. And again, it's going to look incredibly different for every individual. So I don't know if you want to speak into yours.
Yeah, I will, because, like I said, it's really not a story that a lot of people always know about. But I mean, I had the life kind of slap me really hard. And I find this actually happens to a lot of us where something happens to shake us hard enough to maybe look in a different direction. I feel like that's kind of exactly what happened. So for me, at the time, my childhood best friend was in the hospital. She had a brain tumor. We didn't know if she was going to be okay. She was decaying quite quickly. Her speech and everything was going by this point, and she was waiting to get surgery. And in the meantime, my aunt, she married into my family. She was only 7 years older than me, had cancer, and she wasn't doing well either. And she rapidly declined very quickly as well. So this all happened in 1 week. My best friend got brain surgery, and my aunt actually ended up passing. And so this all happened to me, very, very quick succession. I just about lost two people I cared immensely about in my life at that point in time. And everything in me just was so shaken at that point. I lost exactly my identity. I didn't know even who I was anymore, because I just had this thought keep popping in. I was like, man, am I okay with my life? Like, is this enough for me? Because every part of me just kept screaming at me, like, no. Like, I thought, you know what? If my aunt was 33 and she passed away, which is 1 year from my age right now. So my birthday this year was like, wow, okay, next year is going to be, pretty big one for me, because I also know of other people that were 33 and passed. So I think for myself at that moment, that was my hard slap. And I really realized, like, I can't keep doing these things. Like, I've just been trying to make everybody else happy but myself. I had a home, I bought a car, I had the job. Basically, I just didn't have the family or the white picket fence because I didn't want that. So it was just one of these things that I was 20, was I 25 when all that happened? Like, I was quite young. And so everybody kept saying to me, "Oh, you're so young. You'll get it all figured out. Don't worry about it. You should be happy with all you've accomplished." Right. But I wasn't. And so this took me by, the swing and a punch. And I ended up having to go to BC, and after we came home, I basically was faced with an ultimatum from my boss at that point in time. She even knew everything that was going on. I just thought to myself, what in the actual fuck is happening right now? Right? It's just like one thing after another. And I do feel as though a lot of people can probably relate to that, because it just seems to be like the ball just starts rolling. Next thing you know, it's like shit pie after shit pie. But this is where I also started to realize, okay, this seems to be happening for a reason. I don't know what the hell that is. I don't have any understanding of why, but maybe I'm really not supposed to be here anymore. And just everything in me, once again, that question came up and said, okay, if I'm not going to be here by the time I'm 33, 34, is this enough for me? And everything screamed at me no. And I just in that moment, I was like, fuck it. I'm gone. I'm leaving. So I left. I walked out of my job that day, and I was my full-time job, and I had bills to pay. I had mortgages. I had like all sorts of stuff. But in that exact moment, I never felt so free in my life either. And that was just the beginning for me. And after that, a couple years went by, and I kind of was all over the map, just trying to figure out, this or that, spent a bunch of money on coaches and business stuff, but I didn't look inwards. And that was part of my problem. I kept trying to search everything in the external, trying to find my answers in the external, and not realizing at that point that, everything comes from within. So eventually I found a mentor, started working with this mentor for, 3 months, ended up leaving the job I was in actually after that and started my business. And nobody actually knew about my business yet. And so, but again, it was just following this notion of knowing that this is meant for me. There was things that happened in those 3 months that happened so fast that I started to realize the more I trusted myself and my gut instinct, and like realized that I am not here alone. I'm not doing this alone. And this is so funny because we're such yin and yang, because I'm realizing like yours was of course all in the external and mine was everything internal, right? I had to keep going inwards. I had to keep figuring out what the hell my connection was. And once I found it, I broke down crying. I will never forget that day. I remember sitting in this chair, bawling as I'm on Zoom with my mentor, bawling. And she said to me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm crying. These are tears of joy." Because I just realized that I don't have to live like this anymore. I can choose something different. And in that moment, mediumship and my psychic abilities were supernatural to me. I was only allowed to practice for a very short amount of time before it was like, no, you need to be like going and doing this. This is what, this is something you enjoy doing. Why aren't you doing it? And it just clicked again. And so I just started following my gut instinct when I felt like the action needed to be taken. And then all of a sudden, this proof started to lie down at my feet, right? The more I changed inwardly, the more my external realities started to change as well. So I think for myself, the more proof I got, the more I trusted, the more I started to realize, hey, there's a lot more to this game, and I'm actually in control more of this than I even thought I originally was, outside of the box rather than being in the box. So my awakening was a little different, I would say. It was definitely not as intense, but it was probably more intense inwardly than it was from the external, because I didn't see things happen in my external until I changed what I knew from inside. So I would say that's probably the biggest part for me, and then ever since, I've just like I hit that treadmill and I've just been running full fucking throttle ever since. It's just like a space where I saw it, I found it, and I didn't wanna get off the treadmill now, right? It was something different for me, and it felt good, and it felt like I found my home again. It felt like I was remembering who I really was, my inner power, and I wasn't afraid of it anymore. It was always a place where, even being a child, I remember people were really intimidated by me at certain points, because if I really stood in my light, people were like literally shying away from me, or they would talk bad behind my back, or they would do this or that, right? And it didn't really ever bother me, even from when I was the time I was a child, but I just couldn't ever understand why. But as you come into these parts of remembering who you are, all of a sudden it starts to click. Your entire reality starts to click. You start looking back on shit, you're like, oh, right? Like, I think that's also the other part about remembering self, is you start to see how your external reality is followed between, what we've been given from the time we were a child. So for me, I think my awakening was understanding more so too how external realities actually worked as well, rather than just remembering my own gifts. It was like really learning how to run in this world in a very different way and create something very different. So I know I'm supposed to be, I remember sitting in meditation once, not long after I started my business, and I was kind of sweating because, I didn't really know. It's a very unsure time. Everybody's used to having security. So I was definitely still working through things. And I remember them just saying to me, and them being my team, my guides, they said, "Remember who you are. You're supposed to be a light that other people can follow." And that made me feel better, because it was like, okay, I'm not just taking these crazy risks for no reason. Like, this has got to have some kind of outcome that benefits not just me, but others, so they can see it for themselves to happen too. Right. And I think that's for us. You can't do it for yourself, do it for the other people you wanna be impacting, right? If you can't do it for you, do it for other people, as hard as it gets, because it does get hard at times. There's definitely things that I wanted to run away from, for sure. But again, it's a process. It's not to be done all at once. You're not gonna be asked to eat all the food in the world, for your entire lifetime in one go. It's one plate at a time, and this is no different. And awakening is no different. And I think that's why there might be an initial shift, like all of us usually have, right? We start to remember who we are, we start to make the shift. But that shift doesn't stop growing or expanding, like you said. It is something that we find and then we just continue to follow because it feels good, or we like learning it, or there's something there for us to bring to the world or for ourselves. So making it a little easier on yourself and giving yourself grace, I think, is also really important, because you're not crazy. Even if you can't talk to anybody about it necessarily. I was very blessed to have that one person in my life at that point, which was my mentor, that, I could take questions to, and she never made me feel crazy or judged in any way. And that's also part of the reason why we created our community too, is we want people to have that space to be able to talk about things. So, yes, we do our podcast. Yes, we teach and give a lot of things in here, but if you feel as though you want a community, that is part of the reason why we created ours. We want to make sure people have safe space to explore or talk about their experiences.
Yeah, you reminded me as a lot of key things listening to yours, and kind of, for me, again, this is what it took. This is the experience it took for me with who I was and where I was at that time to extricate, for me to make that choice and decision that I don't need to be living this way. I don't need to be suffering. I don't deserve this. I haven't done anything to be experiencing this, right? Like, there were all these layers of the realization. And for me, it took like a 747 landing on my forehead to move me out of where I was so that I could follow my purpose and path. And it's so interesting, right? Because I am external, I just jumped from person to person or mentor to mentor, um, and followed them down paths that were not of my highest good. And yet they were, because it's always working out, for your favor. And it's like that seeking, and like I would learn everything the mentor could teach me. And then I just always had this sense of like, this is all good and great, but this is also not my truth. There was just something in me that kept driving to like, okay, they have given me everything they can offer me, and it's still not my authentic truth. It's not fully resonating. There's something more, there's something more. So I began to learn when I started studying shamanism with Hank Wesselman. That's when I learned kind of the whole creating your reality from within, and you do a journey into your secret garden in your heart. And kind of that's where it began for me to understand, like, that you create your external reality from within. But that was, I had already been through multiple shaman and mentors and years of experience before even coming into that place. And so, yeah, it's just really interesting how it all works. And just to, your journey is your journey. It's unique. And like you were saying, this is part of offering the community. Like, your journey is likely not going to be like mine or the other Daynas. And you know, depending who you are and how you operate, and if you're someone that, like me, I had to go down all these paths that weren't exactly true in order for me to then turn inward to find my own, right? Again, it was just what it took for me. Versus like Dayna's just been a lot, uh, it's been a lot more rapid, I feel like, kind of getting there. It hasn't been years and years and years drawn out. And then just really being able to accept, like, without limiting what the possibility is. I think that that was a big thing that I needed the journey, because who I was before couldn't even conceptualize like being a channel, yet this is what I was here to be. Like, if somebody would have told me that back when all that happened, I would have been like, you're crazy. Just like if they would have told me you're going to shave your head in X amount of years, I would have been like, never in a million years in this life am I going to shave my head. And here I am, right? Like, so just, yeah, I think being open, asking questions, finding the guidance, knowing you're not alone, finding the people who are going to help you learn to trust yourself.
That is the most important piece. It's not even necessarily about the other people. You gotta trust yourself. You gotta know what your truth really is for you and what's actually resonating, because otherwise you end up in places, and sometimes again it's needed for ourselves to start realizing that we adopt other beliefs that people have. I mean, we all have filters from our own perspective, and you know no matter what kind of information is being delivered, it's still going to come somewhat through a lens, if that person has a lens, to a degree of their own beliefs still. And even for myself it will, right? But I think my beliefs are so deep into other directions that people are just not used to necessarily seeing. But I really came to realize, it didn't matter. There's certain things that other people have said, or, beings that have been doing this for years and years and years, and they'd say something, and I'm just like, I just don't know if that resonates for me. And that's okay, because that just means it's not your authentic truth in that moment. We must remember our souls have come from all over the place. We have all lived different, diverse lives from all sorts of different places and different beings and different experiences for every single one of us. So just because, even though we've got the same name, our journeys were completely different. And they're supposed to be, because we have also lived completely different lives, all sorts of different places as well. So we all have to remember we're all unique piece of the puzzle, and there's no right or wrong way of the way you're experiencing your journey. Like, that is for you to decipher for yourself and nobody else to fucking tell you that there's something wrong or something right in the way you're doing things. Even if you decide to go get certified, and I cannot tell you how many people are like, well, I need the paper to prove. I'm like, no, you fucking don't, but okay. Like, you know, if you're going to go learn from someone else, that's fine, but take what resonates for you out of it still, because it does not mean every piece that you're going to learn from that person is going to match up to your frequency. Like, that's the other part is, even if you're learning from someone else, you got to trust yourself enough to know, okay, well, pieces of this have allowed me to understand, but it doesn't mean the whole picture is mine to adopt into my life or to use in my own journey. So, like, I think like Zahara's really tangling up my back about this. I think they're really adamant that people really understand for self is like, you have all your answers already. A lot of people you're going to go visit or see or learn from, you're not actually learning from. They're activating something in your own frequency that's allowing you to remember. And then it's your choice whether you want to trust yourself and go with it, or maybe you don't in that moment. That's okay too. You learn it, a little farther into your journey, but the seeds have been planted, right? Your whole garden doesn't grow at the same time. And so it's the same thing when we're going through these notions, is really learn for yourself how to trust your own gut knowing, because that'll also make your journey a lot easier. Now, your ego is a whole nother fucking story. That's a lot different than your gut knowing. But at the same time, that's also part of our journey. Our ego's only here to be our teacher and keep us safe. And whatever's worked for us in the past doesn't mean it's going to work for the rest of our life. But that's where the patterns and the beliefs and everything come into place, that we are now trying to learn and understand what is serving us and what's not going forward. So that's a part of all of your awakening, and that won't ever fucking stop. That is always a learning curve.
And I think like that's a good point too, is the most transformative experiences that I've had with mentors or coaches have not been the ones that I've gone to learn about this or that or gain a certification. It has been the people I have gone to who have helped me like do the inner work. So trauma mapping, shadow work, inner archetype work, neuroscience, behavioral psychology, reprogramming the beliefs. The individuals who have helped me to uncover, surrender, let go of fear programming and everything I am not, that is what has launched me to what and who I am. So I would say like if you're going to invest, from my perspective, in my experience and opinion, so take it or leave it for what it is, like that's where you start the inner work. And then you will be equipped to fully follow your own intuition and your own path and trust yourself.
And it does make it easier when you have those tools coming from within you, because now you're not looking for that external validation anymore. You really are following your own golden arrow, which is coming from within yourself. And to be honest, it's very liberating. It's very freeing. It's very freeing when you realize, hey, you actually don't need to rely on anybody in your external environment to make this happen for you or follow your path. Because, and this is again where people will be like, oh, well, you're crazy for doing this or that. I'm like, call me crazy all you want, but my idea was given to me, not you. And that's the other piece you also got to remember, is like, we all have our own ideas. We have our own, you know, path from a sense of a higher self that other people, of course, are not going to understand, because they're probably not on the same path. They're on their own, right? And that's okay. Allow people to judge you all they want. But it's when you have judgment of another that is going to be reflecting back to yourself about something going on within you. And again, it's always a mirror. So if you can get to know yourself, you're going to start to understand your external environment a hell of a lot better. And when you start to see it for what it really is, I promise you, everything does get easier, because now all of a sudden you're not muddled anymore. You're not swimming through dirty water trying to find the coin at the bottom of the pond. You're seeing everything for what it is. You're seeing through the bullshit of either that being your own ego or, these beliefs or these things other people are saying. And so when you have that unshakable confidence in yourself, life gets to be more fun. Life gets to be easier. It doesn't get to be this stressful place anymore. I mean, yes, of course, I understand lots of people have families, people that they still have to have interactions with, and that's a whole nother deal, of which we will talk about in another episode about neutral space, because that's also an important skill that we learn in energy. But when it comes to yourself, it's your journey. It's not anybody else's, it's yours. Find the people you can trust to talk to. If you're feeling like you need to explore it through, talking with somebody, whether that be our community, us, or someone else, find someone you trust and feel comfortable with. And going from there, I always say to people in my readings, a lot of the time people come for readings and they're like, I just feel like you're validating everything that I've already gotten hits on. I'm like, yeah, that's really all I really am doing. You've gotten these hits for a reason. You're just doubting yourself or questioning something within you, from your ego mind that isn't so sure about it, right? And so sometimes getting a little bit of validation can help, but I am not giving anybody really much else than things that have already been delivered to them, So it's the same thing for ourselves. I know it can be hard to decipher at times, but this is a space where, you get to explore this for you, and going forward, that's, your journey, no one else's. So trusting yourself and getting to know yourself and remembering who you truly are and accepting your power does make this life to be a lot more fun, even when the challenges do show up, because you don't have the same mindset anymore. So it does get to be a better space. Now, I'm not going to say all your emotions are going to disappear by any means, like you're still going to have emotions from people passing, or whatever's going on, and the challenges that are showing up, but it doesn't mean you get to sit and wallow in that anymore, right? Your life gets to change to the way you want it to, instead of being told you have to sit in the boat and pull in your oars and shut up and sit in the back, right? We're in control. And that's not how this world actually works. But a lot of the time they didn't want us to find our power either, because our world would look a hell of a lot different if we did. So, but that's where we're going. It gets to be more beautiful. It gets to be easier, but you have to make a choice for yourself to accept that. I feel like that's a really great place to just leave it. We are rolling up on our, I think, half an hour
Yeah. I
mark now. So unless you have anything else to add.
No, we could go on for a long time, but I think that's good for this episode and for now, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And if you guys are interested in joining our community, we always have links in every description of each of these podcasts, or you can always send us a message either on social media or whatever, wherever else you might find us. We do have lots of our information on here. So until next time, we will see you guys then.